Back in 2012, I was diagnosed with a serious case of Crohn's disease and I almost lost my colon. Back then, I was young, I was in pain. It took about a year and a half before I finally got a diagnosis. And really, I had no idea leading up to my diagnosis that my life was going to change forever. Honestly, getting diagnosed with IBD felt like a nightmare. And here's what I wish I knew back then. Hey, I'm Jennifer, and I am a fitness and nutrition coach who specializes with people who are dealing with IBD, whether it's Crohn's or colitis. I help women take back control of their health by reducing their symptoms through things like stress management, proper nutrition, and strength training. But before I got here, I went through a very long and painful journey myself. And today I'm sharing my diagnosis story with you because I know there are many women out there who have gone through something similar. And my goal in my community here is to make sure you don't feel alone with your IBD diagnosis. So before my diagnosis, I started to notice some weird symptoms happening. I remember I was dealing with skin problems. I was starting to notice my digestion was just not regular. It started fluctuating between diarrhea and constipation, and I would get very bloated and uncomfortable no matter what I ate. At one point, I was having 8 to 10 bowel movements per day, and that's when I knew there was something going on. Back then, before my diagnosis, I really didn't know the first thing about health. Now I am all about health, but back then I didn't care about eating healthy. I didn't care about working out. I didn't care about stress. I didn't care about any of that. And so I was just going through life like a 20-year-old does without a care in the world. And so these changes started happening to my body. And back then I was super embarrassed. You don't exactly want to share with people, hey, by the way, like I'm having 8 to 10 bowel movements per day. We don't really want to share that, especially with someone who may not be. And they're like, whoa, that is insane, right? So it felt very isolating because I didn't feel comfortable sharing what was going on and what was happening to my body. Like obviously I didn't know. And so it really did feel like there was so much confusion and just mental issues going on where I was coming to terms with it, but also not understanding why my body was behaving this way. And so that drastically impacted my daily life. Back then, I had just graduated college and I was also working full-time as a bartender. So luckily my job was a job where my position didn't really start until later in the day. And thank goodness for that, because I remember in the morning, I would wake up, I would eat breakfast, I would have coffee, and I would be pretty much glued to the washroom for the rest of the morning. And so I really had to plan my day around my symptoms and like knowing I couldn't really go do something in the morning without having to worry about, is there going to be washroom access there? Like I'll never forget the one time my sister and I went to the mall and I was so worried, oh my gosh, is there a bathroom? And I remember I had to run off and find a washroom. And I just remember that feeling very frustrating and embarrassing. Now I still had enough energy to make it to work, but my energy levels were definitely not very good. And to be honest, I think because my energy levels were so low, I really did like even more low energy habits. In the restaurant industry, you're often working late, you're very go, 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 you're eating the food there. And so after work, it's very common for all the staff members to go out and have a drink somewhere, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. And so I was pretty much just being like, well, if I feel this way, I'm just going to go out and do these things. Obviously, that wasn't getting me closer to seeing improvements, but that's a whole other topic. But back then, I really didn't want to come to terms with having to change anything. And I didn't know those answers. So I just kind of was like, well, if this is happening, like whatever, and it seems like there's nothing I can do and nothing is helping. So I might as well just go out and do whatever and eat whatever and drink alcohol. And so it took me about a year and a half to get answers. So I was seeing my family doctor multiple times and saying like there's definitely something wrong. And she was pointing me in certain directions. I would see a specialist over here, and then they'd be like, well, this is not in my realm. Like, I don't think that this is what you have. Okay, let's send you over here. I did so many tests. I did a few different colonoscopies with different doctors. I did a barium swallow. Anything you can think of, I did it. And so no one could really figure out what was going wrong, or going on with me, I should say. And this was very frustrating because I know at one point I felt like there was this burning sensation in my esophagus, and I couldn't eat anything that went into my mouth. Like when I swallowed it, it was burning. And so this was very disheartening, and I ended up actually dropping crazy amount of weight in like a couple weeks. And I ended up actually dropping a lot of weight. I dropped about 20 pounds in the matter of weeks because I wasn't able to eat anything. The first colonoscopy I had was from a surgeon, and I remember everything to this day. I felt everything. I was screaming, I was swearing. And I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm just explaining like this is my story with the surgeon. But he was like, okay, like this seems like there's a lot of inflammation going on here, and I don't think I'm the doctor for you. He couldn't even actually complete the test. He's like, hey, I'm pretty sure you have Crohn's disease, but it's out of my realm. So he referred me to my GI specialist, who I still see to this day. I have been working with him for many years, and yeah, he's helped me a lot. So finally I made it to him, and I explained how scared I was of the colonoscopy after this experience. And he promised me I was in good hands, and said, I will never make you feel like that in a test again. Don't worry. And so he got me to do a test, and that confirmed that I did have Crohn's disease. To make matters worse, I was dealing with fistulas when my IBD was present, and fistulas are very embarrassing and painful, and they are very uncomfortable. And so my doctor, when he did the colonoscopy, he noticed the area of the fistula from the inside, and then he took some biopsies from those areas. And then he actually ended up telling me that I had precancerous cells in my colon, to add some cherry on top, right? Like as if dealing with this diagnosis wasn't enough, that I'm being told, yeah, and you might have cancer in your colon, and we might have to remove it. And so this was very hard for me to hear and to accept after being diagnosed. Obviously, my doctor gave me some medications to focus, or to help reduce things. But I knew from that day, it didn't happen right away, but I knew that there was more I could do, because obviously, like I said, I wasn't really living a healthy, active lifestyle back then. And so I eventually, not right away, I decided that, hey, doing what I'm doing, working late at this bar and going out and eating bar food, like that's not getting me the improvements I want. So there needs to be some changes that I need to make, and no one else can make those changes for me. And so I'm sure if you're watching this and you're dealing with an IBD diagnosis, you know how frustrating it is to be told, hey, you have this disease and there's no cure for it, but good luck. All the best. Here's some meds. Good luck, right? It feels like we're not getting the right support, but in reality, medical doctors are trained in a way to diagnose and to prescribe a solution to that diagnosis, right? It's not their job to tell you what to eat or how to live your life. And so now that I've gone through that, and I had to take the steps forward and kind of figure it out by myself. Back then, not to age myself here, but there was no YouTube, there was no Instagram, there was no Facebook. I was going to the bookstore to get a book on Crohn's disease. And so all I ever remember is getting a book, or buying a book, and then it having a long list of foods I needed to avoid. And it seemed like there was any possible food on that list. And so this made me feel even more frustrated. And I just felt like, oh my God, I'm doomed. What's the point? And so that kind of kept me stuck for a while. Like I said, I was just doing the things I was used to doing. I didn't want anything to change. I was resistant to change. But then I realized, hey, this isn't getting me anywhere. So I need to do this. I need to make some changes. So the first thing I started with actually was brushing up my diet. I'm sure you've done something similar where you eliminate a bunch of things and you try to determine your trigger foods. So that's what I did at first. I cut out gluten, I cut out dairy, I cut out any kind of processed foods. This was very hard for me to stick to. And again, it just kind of kept me stuck thinking my life sucks. But that's a whole other topic that we can get into on another video. I think it's important to do these things at first just to kind of start to learn more about your body. And so now I'm able to enjoy a wider variety of foods, but I know it's all about moderation, which I hope the same goes for you, that one day you're going to be able to get to somewhere like that as well. The second thing I focused on was exercise. My exercise journey started with running. I would be going on runs all the time. And I lived in a condo and there was a gym in that condo and it had a lot of equipment. So I ended up falling in love with going to the gym. I learned how I could make a proper program for myself. I learned how to improve my form. And so that really was one of my favorite things I discovered on my journey of recovery from this diagnosis. And it's something I've done for the last 12 plus years and something I will probably take with me until I die. So after I really got better with my diet and with my fitness journey, I was still dealing with some issues with my fistula not closing up. And, my symptoms had improved drastically along with the medication. I did take the medication my doctor prescribed to help reduce my symptoms, but things were still not where I wanted them to be. And so this is when I discovered the stress management side of things. I discovered yoga, I discovered meditation, and just really understanding my nervous system and how I could support it in better ways, how I could work through some emotional issues that were going on in my head that I was holding on to, working on my mindset. And once I focused on all three of these areas, diet, fitness, and stress management, that's where I really got to where I wanted to be with my symptoms. Fast forward to today, and I have been in remission for 7+ years now. I remember the last time I had a flare up, and knowing what I know now, this is why it's so important to me, because I know what it was like to feel like there was no way out of where I was. And now to be where I am and to understand how autoimmune disease in general is a way of our bodies letting us know that something needs to shift and we need to give that right environment. I'm not saying that doing these things is going to cure you of these diseases, because there's no official cure for autoimmune disease. But I do believe from the bottom of my heart that if we create the right lifestyle changes and the right habits, that we can live a happy, healthy life despite this kind of diagnosis. If I could go back and tell my younger self some advice, the biggest thing I would tell myself is that one day you will view this diagnosis as a blessing. And I know that might sound crazy. Maybe you're new to your diagnosis and you're thinking, Jennifer, how could you possibly think of something like this as a blessing in disguise? Honestly, I don't know where I would be if this situation didn't happen to me. Like I said, I didn't know the value of health, and this situation made me realize your health is everything. If you don't have it, you don't have any. It doesn't matter what else you have going on. You need your health to come first. And so now my health is the number one thing I focus on. I make sure I prioritize it every single day. And I want the same for you because I know how good it makes you feel. So if you've been through something similar and you want to share it with me, I would love to hear from you in the comments. I'll be sharing more about managing IBD through fitness, nutrition, stress management, and mindset. So if that's something you need, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.